Hi, welcome to the HR Happy Hour here live at the HR Technology Conference. I'm your host, Trish McFarland. Joining me is my co-host,
hello, Trish.
George Larac. Hi, how are you?
Great to be here.
It's good, right?
How are you?
I'm good. I love this. I love doing this with you in person. I think we could do this every week.
Do you think they could hold like an HR Tech weekly for us?
We should. We may have to switch to like some sort of a monthly video interview. I don't know.
That sounds fun.
Right? We could try that because we've never done that with the HR Happy Hour. So maybe that's our next big thing. But anyway, today we are really excited to bring on this special guest. We have Mervyn Dinnen joining us all the way from the UK, right? And welcome to the HR Happy Hour show.
Thank you. Hello, Trish. Hello, George. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. So for anyone who's not familiar with you, which is probably no one, right? You're sort of infamous now in the HR technology space. But for those who don't know you, we actually met on Twitter. We were talking in another interview about how Twitter really does bring business people together. Mervyn is a perfect example. I think we met online and I think we figured 2009-ish, maybe.
Yes, it was.
And we wound up meeting in person in 2010 and have been friends ever since and business colleagues. Mervyn, I've told a lot of people, he is my go-to talent acquisition analyst in the UK. I mean, he really, when I need to know something from a global perspective, he's the one I go to. So
I follow a lot of the conversations that are going on. I lurk a lot. And when I see Mervyn comment on something, it's like I want to read. That's the one I open up and dig in because
it's very nice of you to say.
Well, I'm excited for this interview.
Right?
I might just sit here and listen.
Well, no, I think it's interesting because I think having been in the analyst space myself and now at a vendor, and it's when you're an analyst, people might think it's very competitive. You don't really listen to each other. You actually do, and you are like fans of that person, right? They have a certain style and a certain. So, Mervyn, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you've been working on lately, because I think you've been doing a lot of interesting research and projects that would really benefit everyone.
Sure. I spend most of my time, my background is HR and recruitment in the UK. I spent most of my time in recent years working with HR and recruitment technology companies, analysing and writing about the various trends that are evolving in recruitment, how we find people, and also the HR side. So what's happening around the employee experience, how we're onboarding people, how we're developing them. And looking at it from the angle of how companies are evolving and how that's being shaped by the changing preferences and expectations of workers of all ages, I have to say. And some of that has manifested itself in some work I've done for some of the companies here today, where I've written maybe white papers, I've written some thought leadership blogs for them, or maybe spoken at their conferences. But also a lot of the research and findings I've done have found their way into this book. Exceptional Talent, which I co-authored with a guy called Matt Alder, who runs a podcast that some of the viewers might know, the Recruiting Futures podcast. And this book was published 3 months ago. And it looks at how the attraction, hiring, retention, development of people is changing in the evolving world of work. And looking at maybe some of the best case examples of companies who are doing parts of it really well.
Right. What I know, you've obviously been in that space for quite a while. I mean, your entire career. So even in the 10 years or so I've known you, I mean, there have been such great changes. What are some that maybe come up in the book as just being really unique or different from what you had seen maybe 10 or 15 years ago? Yeah,
I think it's an interesting question. I think what came to me while we were researching, beginning to write the book, was that historically we would be having a conversation about there'd be a recruitment person or a job would be identified, there'd be a vacancy, somebody would be interviewed, somebody would be hired, then they start, and then they have their probation after 3 months, and after a year they get a review, then after 2 years they get promoted, and kind of things happen in isolation. It was like a series of events that HR did to employees. But now, and technology has obviously fueled that, this is an ongoing journey. So there's a relationship between a job applicant and a company before there's even a vacancy, because they're a consumer, they might be liking their updates on Facebook, there's already a relationship. And therefore the recruitment is much more marketing based now, and it's about converting that interest into another kind of conversation about working for the company. More and more companies are taking the interview phase as opposed to a kind of a Labours of Hercules or Game of Thrones, last person standing gets the job, as to a kind of giving people an opportunity to show what they can do in the role. So maybe slightly looser definition on the kind of skills and capabilities needed to kind of give people an opportunity to show what they can achieve. And then onboarding, which to me is very much the key phase. A lot of the reasons why people don't work out or aren't successful in jobs and leave jobs after a short space of time can be traced back to the onboarding. And this now starts during the interview phase. I mean, the people you interview, one of them is going to be an employee, and in fact, more of them might join at some stage in the future because the skills that we need change. So we start to involve them in the wider business, what it's like to work there. They start to meet more people. They start to understand more about the business history, its purpose, its vision. And so that when somebody actually starts working with a company, they're already connected to people there. They already know what they're doing. They know a bit the company. Their induction and what they need to learn is already done online through a portal or through an app. There are some great new companies coming up, particularly in Europe, who do onboarding through an app. And so when they start, it's kind of a much easier, nicer way in. They know about the company. They're already probably socially connected to their team and their manager. So they're beginning to, there's an information flow that helps with the settling in. And the probation period, rather than a kind of an assessment, yes, you're right, no, you're not, is more of a confirmation. So, I mean, what I found speaking to companies is that a lot of managers are now talking to their new hires almost on a weekly basis. How are you going? How are you settling in? Is there anything more we can do for you? And that in itself sets up a different approach to performance management. So instead of at the end of a year saying to somebody, actually you did something wrong 7 months ago, we didn't say anything so it wasn't time for a review, but because of that we can't promote you. It's actually a kind of in real time people know how they're performing, what they're doing, and how they need to change and what they can learn to maybe improve their skills. And ultimately, this leads to a slightly different approach to people leaving a business, as opposed to a kind of making it all about the person and maybe not their performance. And we kind of break that relationship. So our alumni don't necessarily want to have much more to do with us. It's now this ongoing relationship continues past somebody leaving. So they can be an advocate, they can be an advocate for customers, they can be an advocate for other people coming to join us. They themselves can return. Maybe when they've got other skills, they might, we might have jobs in 2-3 years' time we don't know about now that might need skills that they have. And obviously, in the world of kind of employee review sites, they're the people who are going to be posting reviews on Glassdoor, Kununu, and places like that. So we want them to leave in a way where they're going to say positive things.
Right. No, that makes sense. I know it's really important, even what we're doing at Infor, in terms of it even goes beyond taking that onboarding experience and all the way through every single transition of your employee life cycle. So as you're promoted, or maybe you move laterally or move into a different department, it's about keeping that same level of engagement that you get if you're doing that in your onboarding process all the way through, so that you're not losing people, right? It gets them more tightly connected. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of?
Well, this is exciting to me. I've been doing a lot of work around employee experience, and it dovetailed out of engagement.
Right.
And now, I've been saying we've been having this conversation in the market about candidate experience and employee experience. And I agree with you completely. It's really one thing.
It's one, right?
And we're setting expectations that we then deliver on, and that's where things get broken. And I think that's why I love what you said about taking it back to onboarding. Because that's where we start delivering on the expectation, on the promise we made when we were recruiting.
Right.
And there's this brand experience as a consumer I have, and I think I know the company I'm going to work for. I learn more as a candidate. And sometimes, if that's not set appropriately, those expectations, you have that feeling as an employee, like this is not what I signed up for. This isn't the company I thought it was, because all of that front end expectation was selling me, not engaging me, not being transparent.
The number one reason people leave within the first 6 to 9 months is the job wasn't what they expected.
Exactly.
It's either the job or the culture. And that comes down, I was speaking to somebody recently who's a senior manager in a company in Europe in the hospitality and leisure industry. And they bring on a number of trainees every year. And she said that for the first time, almost half of the trainees they brought in this year are gone within 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
Because the job wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
Right.
They knew the day-to-day duties were the same, but they didn't understand the wider working practices, the hours, and at no stage during the recruitment process was that actually made plain to them.
Right.
And they had a perception of what the job would be like, which obviously wasn't matched by the reality. And also you will find now that people of any age will go online and ask other people if they know the company. So I'm speaking to Infor. Anybody know them? Anybody know anybody who works there? And that isn't just the millennials speaking to their friends on Facebook. As you both know, there are plenty of private groups on Facebook for HR people, for recruiters, where these questions get asked. And people come in, and because it's a private group, they'll be very honest.
Yeah, it's so important, because if you don't fit with what that overall job is going to be, and it matters, right? If you're maybe a very driven person that likes having that just constantly changing role, well, you need to know that, right? If you get into a job that doesn't have that component, you'll be bored maybe. But if you're someone who likes structure and routine, getting into a job like that would be a nightmare. So and that's what doesn't come across in a lot of job postings or even in your interview process. I think people still put that sort of interview face on, right? And they're like a cheerleader for come join us, right? Instead of really saying, I would much rather have someone, or I would much rather tell someone, this is the reality of this job. Because I really don't want someone to come on board and leave in 3 months or 4 months or 9 months if they're not really aware of what the job is. So
yeah, the hiring process itself doesn't really replicate much else that people will go through.
Right.
So it's for the job seeker, it's an endless round of interview applications, not hearing anything, interviews where companies are trying to trip them up to find out, to get them to say something so they can rule them out.
Isn't that an interesting perception, though? That
well, it is.
They're trying to trick you, and trip you up. That's
What are the reasons why? And that's
sad.
why I think it needs to change from what are the reasons why you won't be right for us to actually what are the reasons why. And some of that starts, there's some great work being done by companies in Europe, I know, and obviously the US as well, where the first stage is effectively like a game. So, somebody plays it's a bit like verbal and non-verbal reasoning. So that before you've even started matching somebody to a specific job or manager, you've got a picture built up of what they're like, how they think, how they react, what their thought process is like, the kind of areas clearly they're going to be comfortable in, the kind of things that will be outside their comfort zone. So you should be able to take that data and understand if this job is right. But we fixate on a person who we believe will be high potential. And that's usually because they're very confident and because they've got a couple of good names behind them. We assume that they will be able to perform without understanding what were the structures that in their last company, for example, that enabled them to perform well, and can they be replicated in this one?
Right. Well, along with that, I think the whole process, I think part of what you're saying, I have this belief that I'm not alone, the process has been built to exclude people. We go through the process to weed out people instead of including people into the process. And we look at to your point, we look at all of the wrong things. We look at what school did they go to, what skills do they have, what their experience, anything we can bulletize on a resume, we look at those things. Those are important. But if I had a list of 10 things that would impact a predictor of fit and performance, they're toward the bottom of the list. They're important. They need to be looked at, but they're not on the top of the list. It's the things that you're talking about. It's critical thinking and their approach to other people
problem
I'm
solving,
excited to read your book.
creativity.
But you know what? I think that stems from I think we're all of the age. We were raised up where while we were recruiting, we were with a paper resume, right? And there's the human brain, if you've got a stack of them, there are only certain things that you could look at. I mean, you had to look at the school, because you couldn't compute, right, that whole stack of data yourself that quickly. And so I think
it's a 6-second screen.
Right, and so I think the manual process actually drove the behaviors that we're still trying to break today. So now we have all these technologies to come in and make that so much better, but we're still stuck because it's still us. We're just 20 years older. Or at least I would feel that way, right? If I looked at a resume, my eyes would go right to the same old things, So it's like it goes beyond just having the technology. Is how do you retrain the brain of the recruiter or the hiring manager or whoever it is looking at that candidate to not feel like those are the only criteria that are important. So I'm excited to read the book too.
And actually, if you think about it, HR is the function that can change all of this.
Right, absolutely.
They are the people who can say, actually, we're not hiring in this way anymore. We need to change the way we find people. We need to change the attributes we look for in a person to fit with the company and the job.
Absolutely. And now we've got the technology to be able to make that, much easier process.
It's not guesswork now. We actually have the science.
Exactly. Well, Mervyn, obviously we're excited to have you here. Thank you for sharing a little bit of the book. Where can people, connect with you? Because I know you've got, all over social, but where are the best ways if someone really wants to talk to you about either working with them or, more about the book? Where can they find you? And then where can we find the book?
Okay, well, to connect with me, I'm on all the main platforms. Twitter is where I sit most, where it's just my name, @Mervyn Dinnen. LinkedIn is where people will tend to try and connect with me and then send me a message saying, can we have a conversation? So I will always respond, unless I'm traveling to places like Las Vegas for something like this. I will always respond as quickly as I can. In terms of the book, it's published by Kogan Page, and it can be bought from their site. It's available on Amazon. It's available in most places.
Okay. You maybe show the book one more time so that people have the title.
There is a Kindle version, but there's no audio version.
Okay.
Whether that will change at some time soon, I don't know. But
can we call you and you can just read it to us on the podcast? Maybe we do that. Can we do a chapter every month?
Yeah. Okay. I'm up for that. I'm up for that.
Yeah, exceptional talent with Mervyn Dinnen. Mervyn, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming all the way from London to Las Vegas. Yes. This is definitely a highlight for George.
Just to meet you two and have a chat.
I know, right? This is perfect. So, and thank you, George. Obviously, this is a great place. Where can people connect with you? We haven't really highlighted where they can connect with you.
Sure, at hrwins.com. That's where I publish everything. All the links to all the platforms are there, but I'm on Twitter at @GLarock, and you're better to go to my website first because I don't want to spell that.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you both, and thank you everyone for listening to the HR Happy Hour.